Hello and welcome to this episode of the Curiosity Key podcast. I'm joined today with Bradley Hatchett from Network My Club, and we're going to be talking all about networking and the power of using online events to get more from your business. So welcome, Bradley. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So one of the reasons why I was really keen to get you to come on this podcast is because you have completely adapted your business when lockdown came about earlier this year. And, you're kind of combining quite a few things that I have a huge interest in, sort of sports and networking and online events. So first of all, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to explain a little bit about what your business looked like before lockdown. And now, and what it looks like now.
Yeah, I'm glad you've given me the chance, because I'm definitely explaining what to new people I meet who Network My Club were before lockdown and who we are now. And very quickly, before we have always been a business networking membership organisation. Pre-lockdown, our events would take place at iconic sporting venues, so places like Twickenham Stadium, the Oval Cricket Ground, the Amex Stadium, so all across the southeastern London predominantly. They made for great places to network in, very different to a bar or a hotel in the city, for example. And that's what our business was built on, in terms of events and as a networking, as a membership organisation, providing that support to businesses to make sure that they're meeting the right people. Lockdown hits, and we've had to completely pivot the business on its head, turn the business on its head and move online, which has been a really if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would say it's a very stressful journey, but it's been a really challenging journey, but one that has really opened up some opportunity for us. So now we are running all of our events online. We've adopted the platform Remo, having spent time on Zoom. Didn't really work for us as a tool to replicate our popular in-person events, which we prided ourselves on being very well attended. Moving that onto Zoom was very difficult, whereas Remo for us has given us the ability to replicate as best as we can that in-person format we had, including guest speakers and informal networking and that sort of thing, and ultimately networking, which I personally don't think Zoom gives you a huge amount of. 7 months now into the lockdown. Now we're going into the next lockdown, but we're an online networking company that has had to completely flip our business around and move to online. But as I say, it's been a challenging but an exciting sort of journey the last 7 months, and who knows how much longer for we'll just be online and until we're back in person.
Oh, well, you've just given me all of the questions from that intro to talk about, because there is a lot that we can talk about here. And just as a testament, I've not yet had the opportunity to attend one of your events. However, through a mutual contact, I've heard great things about the events that you're doing using Remo. So let's talk first about that period of adaptation, because obviously you can't run in-person events. You knew that you needed to adapt and change. You knew that Zoom wasn't the right fit. So what was your process in terms of finding a different platform? Because Remo is a really great tool. I've used it a few times, had a great experience with it. We can talk a little bit more about that later, but I'm keen to know a little bit more around how you decided that Remo was the right solution for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did, at the start of the lockdown, we did pretty much what everyone did and adopted Zoom. And for us, it was a really good tool for us to, as a bit of a stopgap, really, to say that we are doing something virtually. I was very transparent with our members to say that just give us some time to get our head around it. It's as new to us as it is to you, so please bear with us. We're going to try lots of new things. Some will work, some won't. And we were just finding that we were trying to bend Zoom to work in our favor. It's a great communications tool, a really good platform if you've got smaller groups. But for us, as I say, we prided our events being on well attended, 75, 100 people in a room kind of events, and doing that on Zoom just was not possible. So we had limited ourselves to the number of attendees to keep it really conversational. I was pretty much chairing the events and giving people the chance to speak and talking about different topics. But as I say, in terms of, as a business, we weren't able to scale that much further than what we were already doing. The way to scale was to do more events, but we were putting as much time planning and running an event on Zoom as we were, even our in-person events, just without the travel and the time taken to actually deliver it. So the option of adding more events to the schedule wasn't really a viable one as a business. We've got a finite amount of resource as a team of 4. So we didn't want to spread ourselves too thin. So yeah, I got to work looking at different pieces of software and platforms that are out there. And a contact of mine shared me a link to Remo and said, this is something that's emerging, take a look at it. And yeah, just started to investigate how it worked and what it looked like. And to be honest, it was very rough around the edges when we first adopted it back in April. And I thought I could see what the premise of the platform and how it could work from a networking perspective. And we just decided to test a couple of events. We did some for just purely our members to say, look, this is something we are investigating and looking to adopt. Could you almost be our guinea pigs and work with us on an event to see how it works? And, that first event, that first test event pretty much was a really good learning experience from us. We gathered so much feedback, not just from attendees and how they experienced it, but ways to better prepare them and what they wanted to know before the event, and because it was very new to them as well. And for those who don't know the Remo platform, it is a hell of a lot more different than something like a Zoom or Teams or Skype. And when you first go into a Remo event, it can be overwhelming. So we did a couple of test events with members only. Again, very transparent to say this may not work, it may be brilliant, but just bear with us. And that was really our process in trying Remo. It was the one platform and one piece of software that stood out to me. And we'll come into it a little bit later, I'm sure. But ultimately, what it gives attendees is that freedom and the flexibility to move around an event. And someone said to me just last week after our event, he said for the first time in 7 months, he's had control over his networking again, which was a great testimonial to have. And that's essentially what it gives you. So as I say, it was rough around the edges, that it runs off your browser rather than a third-party application. So there's a few things that you need to be wary of with that. And that's just something you learn over time, ways to prepare people. But I saw the potential. So we thought, let's run events on Remo alongside Zoom and see, what traction we get. We know the Zoom platform works well. We know our format on Zoom works well, but Remo is potentially going to give us ability to scale the business and scale our events back to the size we were. So that happened over, I'd say, a 3-4 week period from around the middle of April. And then from middle of May, we were really sort of hitting the ground running with Remo, started to invite people that weren't members. So yeah, that was our process really to migrate onto Remo. And then around June, July, I think it was end of June, we made the decision to just move all of our events onto Remo, and we don't do anything on Zoom anymore.
Brilliant. And did you test or try any of the other tools or platforms that were kind of coming out at the time?
It was more demos with their teams and things like that. And for us, there wasn't, as I say, our format on Zoom worked well. We were comfortable with it. Our members liked it. It was generating some good conversation and we were connecting up people well. So there wasn't anything out there that really offered I think the one thing the Zoom events were missing was an element of networking. It was very conversational. I know there's the breakout rooms. We didn't tend to use the breakout rooms so much, purely because you don't, as an organizer, you don't have as much involvement. We love to hear from our members. We love to understand what's going on in their world. So, yes, I appreciate the breakout rooms offers an element of networking. But again, I think people are trying to bend it to work in their favor. And there was just nothing out there that stood out to me and go, there's that networking element that our events are missing. And Remo just offered that side of the events, the networking element, along with, the other part of Remo is the presentation element, which still allowed us to do discussions and guest speakers and that sort of thing, which again, our events on Zoom had, and we're also missing guest speakers in Zoom. So there were pros and cons to both, but I just saw there was more opportunity within Remo, particularly from a networking event perspective. I personally haven't seen anything out there to rival it in terms of networking and giving people that freedom to network.
It is great because it mimics those, that kind of open networking where you can kind of you can see somebody on their own and go and speak to them, or you can join a table, or you could see a group of people that you know and then go and join their table or talk to them. There's so many different options with a Remo, and especially for an event organizer as well, you have that control where you can say, right, I'm going to summon everybody to the main conference area, give them enough notice, but summon everybody to the main conference area so nobody misses anything. You don't have people joining late, and it kind of removes a lot of the frustrating things about organizing an in-person event, I think, just because you've got those controls of moving people around, but then also giving them the flexibility to kind of have that control themselves.
Yeah. We've even heard feedback from, because you get the ability to configure the room based on your event, and even people who've come to our events say it's just nice to see virtual tables and chairs, and be able to move on to different tables. And where I think a platform like Remo we will continue with online even when we're back to face-to-face, because Remo has really allowed attendees to streamline the networking process. Where you would typically go to an in-person event, and that there's 3 or 4 people there that you want to try and catch up with, or you want to try and meet, but you don't know where they are within the event. You don't know which table they're on or whether you might bump into them. Whereas Remo, you get to hover over the room and say, oh, there's so-and-so that I've been meaning to speak to. I'm going to go jump on their table. Or, or in our case, we've configured our room so we've got one-to-one areas within the actual floor plan that people can have those private conversations during the event, establish if there's another conversation to have afterwards, and after they're done there, they can just jump straight back into the main networking area. So in my opinion, that Remo has allowed, and this is down to us as a team to educate people how best to utilize it and how best to use their time on it. But we've started to see people really streamline that networking process where they're doing one-to-ones during the event rather than after. They are meeting more of the right people rather than going into an in-person event in the unknown. And at an in-person event, yes, we say to people, if you know that so-and-so is attending, let us know and we will make an introduction. That doesn't always happen, and we will get pulled from one conversation to another, and admittedly we wouldn't be able to do that. Whereas Remo, again, as I say, gives people the control to see who's in the event, and makes it a lot more efficient for them. There's it's really, as I say, I've not seen anything like it out there. So for us, it's ticked so many boxes based on our events, but I think there is a place for platforms like Zoom from a networking perspective, just on smaller scale, that are more conversational.
Well, we still, I say we, the collective we still use Zoom for LinkedIn local events in Nottingham, but we have quite a large network, but the events aren't always huge. So Zoom works perfectly for us because we can really use those breakout rooms, and it's not a formal sort of networking environment. We're there to kind of encourage people to connect and get to know the person behind the profile and the job title, and just be a little bit more relaxed. So it's perfect for that kind of thing. But the Remo events that I've been to as well, Especially there was one organised by one of my previous podcast guests, Scott Leaper, who organised Kind Fest, which was absolutely wonderful. And it was great because you had like 2 floors within this virtual environment. You had the kind of like networking where you can just go and meet somebody for some sort of like random matchmaking networking. You've got the different tables that all had a theme, and it was all very, very interactive. And then they also had the sort of main event with the speakers and everything, and it just made it all it was all very personal, it was all very interactive, and it was all incredibly engaging and valuable. So there were so many different benefits of using it. But I did want to pick up on what you said before around getting feedback from your members. So what process do you use in terms of getting feedback and actually getting that valuable information from your members?
I mean, post-event, the typical methods of using surveys and things like that, using conversational social posts to not just get involvement from our members, but people outside of our network who are also networking online, and they can share some valuable insight as much as our members. But typically it's Claudia, who works outside as membership manager, will be speaking to members regularly. We'll be onboarding new members, and yeah, I think our policy is that people can come along to a couple of events as a non-member, see how it works for them. So when it comes to the time of considering joining, they can do, or they know the platform, and they can give us feedback as much as members that use it regularly. So that's typically how we'll go down the route of feedback. But it's not just a one event thing. This happens over time, and we're learning. We're almost 80 events in on Remo ourselves, and we are learning more or less after every single event. Oh, we could have done that, or we could have done this. So that's an ongoing process for us. And you look at the whole networking experience or the whole event experience online. It's what could we have done better before the event to prepare people before they attend? What could we do better during the event? What could we do better after the event? And there's just all these stages to consider. But initially, it was about what's the experience within the event. Okay, within the event, people didn't necessarily know what they were going to expect or how the platform worked. Okay, that means we need to focus on before the event, how are we informing people better? So it's an ongoing process, but it's typically through surveys, conversations, using the events themselves to jump onto tables and ask people, how's it going? What would you like to see? So there's various touch points that we tap into, and as a team we'll regularly sit down, whether weekly or monthly, and say, should we try this or should we try that, based on regular feedback. And we'll always try and get feedback, not act upon one-off feedback and say, oh, that we could have done that. If that's a regular thing that we keep hearing over the course of a few weeks, right, let's act upon that and see what we can do. So as I say, it's a forever moving process with feedback.
Oh, it's music to my ears, the fact that A, you have a process, and B, that you actually prioritize that review every single event. Because one of the things that I work with clients on is how to get more ROI from their events and how to leverage events in a more beneficial way for their company, not just in a marketing sort of arena, but also in a sales arena. And, once the event is over, I think a lot of people go to an event or organize their own event and just think, right, okay, I've left the room now, so then that's it, over. But I've always said to people, it's just like, no, actually the easy bit is attending the event, or actually being at the event that you've organized. Even though that may seem like really hard work and really stressful and all over the place, that is the easy bit. It's the stuff that happens before and also the stuff that happens afterwards, to learn and adapt and use that learning in what you do in the future. So it's great to hear that you are using those insights and that you also have a proper process around it, because that just makes life so much easier.
I mean, I wouldn't, it is a process, absolutely. But for us, we've just had to be incredibly reactive over the last few months. I mean, where before, if a good idea came up or a good suggestion came up, we would go, okay, let's work on that over the next few weeks and let's implement that down the line. Whereas now, if an event if an idea is put on the table and it's a good one to run with now, we prioritize that, and we go with that, because things are moving so fast, and the online networking world and the online events world is moving so fast that we as a team have got a very collective agreement that we can almost trailblaze how online networking goes. There is no blueprint. There is no way of how it worked before. So it's really down to people like us to create a blueprint and create something that people, to be seen as a market leader and someone that's as a company, as an organization, that are really sort of leading the way when it comes to that. So, that's where, we are listening to so many people. We are trying to gauge so much, and with the idea being that, we want to create the best experience possible when it comes to online networking, because, as I say, there isn't anything to go by, and there wasn't anything before. So yeah, it's just about being really reactive at the moment.
And what's the most bizarre piece of feedback that you've received over the last 6 months that you've kind of you've heard or you've read and you've been a bit like, oh, where's that come from?
I wouldn't say there's a huge amount of bizarre feedback. The good thing is, from our perspective now, a lot of the feedback we get is regarding the platform, and it's out of our control. Little things like, oh, could you make the icons bigger on Remo, or could you do this? And these are all things that now we build into sort of how we educate people. A workaround for that, for example, is that you can zoom in on the screen slightly and see people a little bit bigger. But now we're starting to get feedback that's more platform related than our experience and our performance related. Not to say that's completely gone, but there's always things that we can work on. But now we're feeding that back to people like Remo, who are very open to getting feedback from users, from event organizers, as they are in a position of significant high demand, and a significant increase in demand over the last few months. So, when we adopted it back in April, I had a personal relationship almost with someone at Remo, and they were saying, how's it going? What could we do better? What's this? And so now, they as an early adopter of Remo, particularly in the UK, it's quite big in the States and in other parts of the world. But yeah, so they wanted to know, how it's working for us. So a lot of the feedback is now platform related, which is good, because they're open to changing that, which is ultimately improving our experience, and others that are using the platform as well. So yeah, that's a good sign for us, that a lot of the feedback is now not so much out of our control, but it's something that we can feed back to the developers at Remo, and they can build that into their ongoing developments themselves.
It's a blessing and a curse, isn't it, really, when you rely on somebody else's tool? Because one of my previous podcast guests uses the same platform as I do for my membership community. So I have the Curious Marketing Club, and I use a platform called Mighty Networks to host that club on. And it's like always the case, the feedback from members is like, oh, it'd be great if we could do this. And a lot of the time we can change and adapt things so that they can get what they want from it. But then other times it's outside of your control, so that you're there feeding it back to the software provider going, oh, can I do this? Can I do this? Somebody said to me the other week, it's like, well, why don't you just develop your own tool? And it's like, well, you could, but that would cost you a lot of money to kind of rewrite what loads of people are already doing. And, you're always going to have to make compromises no matter what you choose. So just choosing the thing that you have to compromise the least on, and just use it to the best of your ability.
And I mean, one thing I will add is that we had members that some preferred Zoom and the format that we ran on Zoom, some preferred Remo. And we almost had to manage that process in terms of feedback. And so, we had to get people just adopting Remo, give it a couple of goes, and let us learn and let us inform you guys better. And we hope that the experience will improve over time. So we had to balance that, and that was something that that was just personal preference. But again, had to look at the viability of each platform as a business and the potential to scale the business on each platform. And that's not just from a business perspective, that's from our members' perspective. How would you rather be in a Zoom call with 10 other people, or would you rather be in a Remo event with 60 other people, and you've got the ability to move around and chat to whoever you want? And that's something that we've just had to we had to navigate probably for a few weeks when we made that transition from away from Zoom to Remo. And, you know, funnily enough, some of our biggest advocates now are those that were biggest skeptics of going on to Remo. So that's a life lesson, really. Give something a go, give it a few goes, don't judge something based on one experience. And so that was something we had to manage in terms of feedback. And when Zoom coming back, or when we had to be very, very strict on the fact that, right, we've committed to Remo, and this is where we're going to go with it.
Oh, it's always the case, and you're always going to have people that, you know, nobody likes change. There was a great article I was reading the other week about branding and about why some brand redesigns fail and why others are okay. And it kind of fits in with a framework that I use with my clients, which is all about designing your network. And it's that, you know, you need to have your fans in your network, people that love you, people that support you, people that are willing to kind of go through that painful testing process with you, and just bear with you on that process. And that your customers should be your fans. And if they're not, then that's a piece of work that you need to focus on. Because when you have fans, like you said, when you're going through that testing, they'll be with you every step of the way. They'll be there to give you that feedback. They'll help you, they'll support you. Because, you know, you could go off on one direction and say, right, okay, this is what we think is the great thing. But without that feedback from your customers, you're not going to build a business that people want to keep coming back to. So it's great to hear you've got that.
And you're right in that they then become your biggest referrers, your biggest advocates, because they feel like they've shaped your product or your service. And if you are willing to listen and give them that time to share feedback, and whether that's via a survey or via a call, they will value that. And as I say, some of the biggest skeptics of our events are now some of our biggest advocates. And that's the same across all industries. And I've seen it a lot with various members in different sectors that have had to really adapt their offering, adapt their business. And, you know, they're saying similar things in that, you know, if you give your existing customers the chance to share how you can improve, they will, you know, the longevity of that relationship will definitely increase. So we've seen it, and I'm seeing it across various sectors that have had to really change and adapt their offering.
It's back onto that know, like, and trust, isn't it? Because nobody loves to do a survey. Let's be honest. We all hate doing surveys. So many people are asking us all the time, just do this survey, give us some feedback, do this, this, and this. But unless you like the person or that you're sort of invested in their success, you're not going to actually spend that time and do the survey. You kind of need that incentive and need that reason to keep going. A lot of what you're saying about Remo's, that it helps give people that purpose and intent for networking, because one of the reasons that people stop networking is because they don't have that purpose-driven approach, and that they give up on it too early. And it also comes down to that fact about developing fans and advocates within your network. So I always think that your kind of fans have to be people that have experienced working with you in some way, whereas your advocates could be people that have just met you and love you and want to recommend you and introduce you and refer you. And what you're saying is that essentially you can build up a network of advocates through the process of networking. When you go networking, you're never going to meet your direct end customers. And a lot of people just think, oh, networking's not working for me because I'm never in front of my direct end customers and nobody's buying from me. Well, first of all, that takes ages anyway. Whereas if you go networking with the view of developing a network full of fans and advocates and people that can refer you, then you get so much more out of it. So based on your experience, because you have experience on both sides of the fence of running and organizing events and sort of helping your members get the great experience from it, where do people go wrong with networking?
I think first and foremost is twofold: is mindset to networking, and going into it, as you say, thinking you're going to meet your end client or that decision maker you need to meet. Some people are very lucky in that they will go to an event and they will meet, but that's a very small percentage. So going into networking thinking it's a quick win and you are going to generate X amount of business is not the right way to start. So that's first things first. And with that comes the wrong expectation, and setting yourself too high an expectation and going, right, I'm going to join this networking group, and after 3 months I want to have generated X, and after 6 months I want to generate X. that's a great way to go in terms of having a strategy and having some targets. But with that needs to come the mindset of you are going there to generate some relationships, get to meet some new people, build on those relationships over time. So when those people meet someone that's in a position to buy or do what you do, they will refer you quite happily. And if they are in a position to buy what you're offering, they will come to you. And, I put a post out on LinkedIn yesterday about the fact that we're going into lockdown. What would be your best tip? What did you learn the last time? What would you share as a piece of advice? And my advice was not to go hiding. And this is a general tip to networking. It's don't just dip in and out of it. Be consistent, because people might not be in the position to buy when you first meet them, or that one time you meet them, but you need to be front of mind when they are in a position to, or when they know someone that's in a position to. So it's all about drip feeding, that insight that you've got, and building on that relationship over time. So when someone thinks, oh, networking, I need to speak to Bradley at Network My Club. And that's really, something that I had that mindset of when I set up Network My Club, and when we were creating our network and building the network. It was like, I want to be, when someone thinks networking, they think Network My Club. And that can apply to all industries. So it's really, I think, going back to your question, it's really having the right mindset and not setting yourself unrealistic expectations, because you will be disappointed, and you will be in that class of people that says networking doesn't work. And I've had that conversation with so many people to say, why is it not working for you? Oh, I thought I was going to get X amount, or I thought I was going to get this. Well, there's the problem. Let's scale it back, and let's not go into it with any expectation. And one of our members, who is a great networker, he's a sales coach, he's probably the best networker I've ever met. When he joined Network My Club, and he won't mind me naming him, Gary Morgan, great guy, he said, oh, just so you know, I'm not expecting anything from my membership in the first year or two. And that's great to hear, because if something does happen in that first year or two, he hasn't got the expectation that it was, but he just knows the principles of networking happens over a longer period of time, and you need to be prepared for that. And that's where, whether you're in a sales role, business development role, or you are the business owner or director, regardless of your position within the company, you need to have that mindset. And it's not a case of going to an event and seeing what you can get. So mindset and too higher expectations would be certainly where I see most people going wrong, that say networking doesn't work.
Great insights and then tips that you've shared as well. Expectations is such an interesting one, because networking is a marketing strategy at the end of the day. And everybody, I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody that's not said, oh, I was really disappointed with how that worked out, or I was really disappointed with doing this. But more often than not, it's all because they didn't have the right expectations around what it was that they were doing, or didn't look at the bigger picture of it. Because I think it goes back to what we were saying before about people treating an event like a singular event or a singular action, and not considering the work that needs to be done once that event is over, the kind of follow-up, the nurturing, the relationship building, having a website or a LinkedIn profile that backs up what you're saying, that adds to that credibility and authority. And I think the thing that I have always said, and I try to get more people to think in this way, is just be more curious. It's like, when you go networking, just think about how you can make the people that you meet more curious about what it is that you can do for them or other people that they know. And then just keep nurturing that curiosity and get them excited about the prospect of doing business with you, because then you're going to create that network of fans and advocates, and you're going to enjoy the whole experience a lot more, because you're going to get more from it as well.
Yeah, you just that's I think that's why we've ended up on the podcast, because we share that same belief. And I say it a lot: the most effective person at a networking event is the most curious person there. And it is so true. Be curious how you can help that person. Be curious about their business. Be curious about how, who can you introduce them to, because it is all about, giving first, receiving second when it comes to networking. That's a very old adage, but it is very true. So being curious in how you can help is such a key thing to getting long-term results when it comes to networking. And as you say, the what you do outside of networking is outside of the event itself is as crucial. And we start first and foremost by qualifying members with that, right? Have they got the right mindset? Have they got the right expectations? Great. Now we can educate them about best practices either side of the event, making sure they look at the delegate list we send out in advance, researching that, seeing who's attending after the event, following up those conversations, and not just once but twice, 3 times, or if not, making sure that you're at the next event so you can see them again. So once you've got that right mindset, great, you're set up for success. Then it's a case of working on a process, on a strategy that works for you, because networking and networking is a skill, much like investing that time into your marketing as a business, into your sales. It plays a really big part in that, and it's not something that's a one size fits all. It is something that you can improve, you can work on over time. So yeah, once they've got that mindset, educating and informing about how best practices outside of that is the easier part, and something that they should be open to learning.
So we're running out of time here, and there's one kind of big topic that I did want to talk about, because it's very sort of plays into what you're doing at the moment, what you offer, and also one of the sort of marketing strategies that I do encourage some businesses to consider, and that is organising your own event or meetup, whether it's a networking event, it's a conference, it's a user conference or something. It's a marketing strategy that I've used for the last 15 years, well, more than that now, in terms of organising our own events to create that community and then do more with it. And it's always proved very, very effective. So we've also talked a lot about creating that experience and also the importance of educating people. So if you're going to run your own event, there is a piece that you do need to do in order to educate the people that you're going to invite to your own event. Do you have any other tips? I'm saying, do you have? Of course you have. Can you share your tips for people that are considering organising their own events?
I mean, there's so much to it, and I have just written a blog about this. There's 6 or 7 key areas to focus on, and a lot of it is driven by asking yourself, what is the purpose of the event? What are you looking to get out of it as a business? What are the audience going to get out of it? And how are you looking to make them feel? What are you looking for them to are you looking to motivate them, inspire them, excite them, sell to them, whatever it may be? There is a purpose as to why you're running the event and why your audience is coming. So once you've understood that and really understood what your event is, the key elements are then, right, what's the right platform for us? What's the right time to do the event? How long should we do the event for? I think a question that I ask a lot of event organizers that are considering working with us with online events is, what's the balance between content and networking and discussion? And that's something that you can work out based on, and this will lead this will drive what platform you use, or we would recommend, and how long the event will go on for. But really thinking about how much is informational and content led from the event, and if it's heavily sided to that, then you can start to choose. Platforms like Zoom are great for that. You probably don't want to run an event for longer than an hour or 45 minutes when it's just someone speaking at you, or webinars and things like that. But if you want to encourage discussion, conversation, networking, there's a host of platforms for that. So I think asking yourself that question about not just what the event, from your perspective and the audience perspective, what's the purpose of it, but what's the balance between content and networking and discussion? Because one thing that we've learned and that people are learning is that there are tools out there to cater for both. I've had event organizers come to us and say, could you work with us to run a webinar for an hour? And I said, okay, so you've just got people talking for an hour. Yes, you should do that on Zoom. That's something you can do. You don't need to invest in someone to do that. Learn the platform, very, very easy to do that. Whereas if someone wants to do a 2-hour conference that's got a combination of informational, insightful talks for 15 minutes, then breakout spaces where people can go and network and have conversations, then that's where we can work with them and work with them on, in particular, the Remo platform. But it's really weighing up, they've obviously considered as an attendee they want to inform them, or they want to inspire them, motivate them, whatever that may be, but they also want them to network and they want to offer that side of things. So I think content and networking discussion balance is a key thing to consider when you are thinking about an online event, and then ultimately why are you doing the event? Because like in-person networking events, virtual events are starting to become as popular, and people are being overwhelmed by the amount of webinars, the amount of online networking events. So why are you doing it, and why is yours going to be any different to all the others that are out there? So there are lots of different tips I could go into about the different areas, but once you've understood that, the rest sort of follows.
Oh, I love the fact that you've just sort of ended on the best, well, in my mind, the best tip, which is like, why are you doing it and what are your attendees going to get out of it? Because it's that thing, like people are going to be so picky around how they're using their time, because we are all completely overloaded with Zoom meeting invites. Lots of people are doing events, but that doesn't mean there isn't an opportunity for you to do your own event or to shine and to really stand out in your market. But I think it's great that you said, right, okay, it's easy for you to do this yourself. You don't need to work with somebody else. So many companies come to me, they're like, oh, well, I just want somebody to do it all for me, especially on LinkedIn. I just want somebody to do it for me. And I'm like, well, or what was it? Somebody said to me the other day, it was like, well, I know that you don't do this, but can you recommend somebody that would? And I'm like, well, I could, but I don't recommend it as a strategy, because when you get somebody else to do it for you, you're kind of like giving away the ownership and responsibility of that particular thing, and you're never going to get what you want to gain out of it. And there are so many different things that you can do that don't require a big learning curve, that are easy to get set up, that are easy to do, and you can just start it small. You don't have to have this big oiled, polished machine. Kind of going back to what we were talking about having those fans. If you're doing something for people that already love you, then it doesn't need to be this kind of like great grand thing, but just getting it started or putting it out there is a great thing to do. And talking to somebody like Bradley about who can advise you and point you in the right direction. And then, if you do really, really want somebody to do it for you, then, you and your team would do a really good job for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're just trying to encourage people is that there is a world outside of Zoom. And I think where people fell into the trap early on in lockdown is taking their event that happened in person and just slapping it on Zoom and trying to make it work. Whereas we just want people to come to us with their event ideas, whether that be a networking event, whether that be a conference, an awards night, whatever it may be. Come to us with the idea and we will use our experience and our expertise to see if it can work and make suggestions that, yes, I think that could work. But equally, if you come to us and say, I just want to run a 45, 60-minute webinar with people talking, I would probably advise you to go to another platform like Zoom or Teams, because that's easily done. But yeah, it's just to try and inform people that there is a world out there that you can pretty effectively, I feel, replicate that in-person event feel online. And arguably, this is another conversation down the line we could probably have, is the effectiveness of online events. There are a lot of pros and cons for the effectiveness of online compared to in-person. And certainly we're seeing them come up. We're seeing that come up quite a lot with our members, where online they're a lot more accessible. But the flip side of that is online events are very easy to just drop off and not attend or something like that. So there's pros and cons to them all, but online events have their place. They're very effective. We've seen that firsthand, not just from our own events, but other events. And yeah, there is a world out there outside of Zoom, which everyone seems to be adopting. But yeah, we are there to help people, and so just to making people aware of that, really.
It's a great point that about online events and doing more with online events, because I remember especially when I used to work as head of marketing, and I used to have all of these people coming at me going, you need to exhibit at this event, you need to sponsor this event, and I'm like, you could go to an event every single week of every single month of every single year and always be doing events, and it was really difficult to choose the right events that you're going to get something out of. Whereas sometimes some of these events that you go to and you're just like, this did not need to be an in-person event, you could have done it in a different way. So it's definitely interesting to see which events will stay as online events in the future and which events will revert back to in person. So We have reached our time, but we've talked about loads in this episode. So if anybody's thinking about organising their own event, you can use what you've listened to in this podcast. If you are just wanting to get more out of your online networking, then you can always go back to the person that's arranging these events and talk to them about even trying Remo or having a look at different options. And, also you've got lots and lots of tips about how to get more from your own networking as well. So Bradley, if anybody wants to contact you or get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
Either through our website, Network My Club website, or my email is bradley@networkmyclub.co.uk, and LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn, always keen to connect up with people and jump into conversations on LinkedIn. So that's a platform I'm a big advocate of. So connect up with me on LinkedIn. That'd be great.
And the final thing that I do want to ask you, if you could share one tip with somebody that's going to a networking event this afternoon or this week, what would that one tip be?
I think arriving prepared is quite a key thing. It's doing that work before the event, and with online networking, and I will focus on online networking because that's the world that we are in. The principles of networking, whether that's online or in person, have stayed the same. But with online, you can arrive. The organizer should be sending out delegate lists in advance. So take the time to look through that. Have a pen and paper with you when you're on the call and take some notes and use those notes to follow up. It's not at an in-person event. You don't have the ability to be writing notes down as you're talking to someone. So arrive prepared. And when you are there, just be present. Don't put your phone in your drawer, close down your emails, close down other tabs, and just be present for that hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it may be. People can definitely tell when you're trying to multitask on a video call, so don't think they can't.
Definitely. Brilliant. Great tips. Thank you so much, Bradley. It's been great having you on here. And until next time, hope you've enjoyed this episode.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much.